Welcome to episode 168 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
Param, when do you think of convention season?
Oh, probably like May to August, sometimes into September.
So I see you're caught in the early 2010s.
Oh, okay.
Convention season is mutated. It starts in March, and now it seems to end in November. So it's less convention season and more there is a convention off season, and the rest of the year is just full of these comic and gaming conventions that are just kind of dominating the local pop culture scenes.
Yeah. I got really, really surprised when my venture captain emailed me in about, I guess, June, saying, "Hey, you're a new officer. We need you to come help with a convention." And I'm like, "Okay, I guess that's part of my responsibilities now. When is it?" "November." What? What?
Oh, and Bard Wannabe is in chat saying that they have Winter War in January.
So it starts in March and ends in March.
So what is the name of the convention that you went to?
Nerd Louisville 2017.
And that's because of Louisville, Kentucky? That's where the name comes from?
It was Louisville, Kentucky's gaming con. This is the second year that it was taking place, so there used to be other gaming cons, but you know how it is. When one con leaves a city, another group of nerds replaces it.
That is not my experience at all. We had Draconis for about 5 years. It stopped, and now we just don't have gaming in Montreal.
What? There's no cons in Montreal?
Montreal is a unique beast where it's like you got to cater to either the majority French and then you don't have any English gaming, or you cater to English and it's like a small town convention in a major city. So don't base any example on how we do it in Montreal. We are a little weird.
Okay. I will accept that people are weird in Montreal. This will be a stretch.
No, it's Montreal that's weird.
It'll be a stretch, but I can manage it.
Speaking of stretch, how much space did I'm sorry, I can't pronounce Louisville, so it's Louisville?
The con is Nerd Louisville.
Louisville. So it's almost like the I should be on the opposite side of the V?
Right. And
okay,
the
town
is Louisville.
Yeah.
Louisville.
I remember.
You can do ul or ill, and it's Louisville.
Louisville. All right.
Yes.
There was a what's his face? Who played Legolas?
I have no idea.
Who played Legolas in Lord of the Rings? Legolas.
Sorry, I do not know.
You don't know?
I'm not very good with actors.
Orlando Bloom. Anyway, there's an Orlando Bloom movie that partially takes place in Louisville, and it's a major, there's a scene where they just try and pronounce it, and it's played for laughs because he can't pronounce that city's name.
Yeah, it seems like if you're not from Kentucky, you do not pronounce it correctly. And it's probably because they don't pronounce it correctly, but it's our town. How we pronounce it is the correct way.
I get that a fair amount too, because it's, to a local, it's Montreal, Quebec. To an outsider, it's Montreal, Quebec.
Okay. Yeah. I've never called Quebec before, but if you call it Quebec, that is probably the correct way to do it. So why does the rest of the world go Qua?
It's not an anglicized version of the French version. That would be Quebec. So that's just how we settled on pronouncing it in English.
Oh, okay. Well, that's just the nature of language and how we will butcher it.
Indeed.
Much like we have butchered con season.
So, back to Nerd Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
Nailed it. Tell me about the space. How big was it? How many people were there?
Well, it took place in an area of town. Well, let me reframe this. We all met up at the Venture Captain's house because he had a big house and he basically put all of the Pathfinder people up so that we didn't have to do hotels because, yeah, tiny town conventions, I get invited to them pretty regularly anymore, and I only show up if I don't have to pay any money. If somebody is covering my hotel and ticket, I will be there and do things. If they're not covering my hotel and ticket, that's what Gen Con's for. But anyway, so we all meet up his place. We get into the caravan. He has a van full of people. I'm with one of the GMs I brought with me from my crew, and we have two of the other GMs in the back seat. And there's probably about 12 of us just like going to the convention space. And then we go to the bad part of Louisville. And then we go to the really bad part of Louisville. And then we go into the really, really bad back streets of Louisville that looks like it's abandoned industrial. And we're pretty sure at this point that we're in the opening chapter of a serial killer thriller. And this whole convention was a horrible lie.
Oh, man. If it was like a Hunger Games, but all the contestants were GMs?
It would be a very short Hunger Games.
Oh, I was figuring they would all be shrewd tacticians.
We're all incredibly out of shape, and it would be over in 20 minutes.
Okay.
Now,
there's still something here. I'm going to get back to that.
But the space that it took place in was surreal. Have you, like, if you've ever watched, like, an early 90s street crime or trendy scene movie, and there is this outlandish dance club / coffee shop / art house places in these impossible spaces, it took place in that. Like there was house music blaring, there was murals on every wall, this humongous rafters and impossible warehouse spaces converted into this super trendy club space. They set out a whole bunch of tables. There was a weird cafe in one point, and then this massive fully stocked bar that never closed, like right next to the table area. The entire convention was spotted with these tiny little Red Bull fridges, and it was just free and open access to the Red Bull.
Oh, that's dangerous.
That was incredibly dangerous. I had to stop drinking them because they did not make accommodations to have water available at this location at all, not even for money. So my choices were alcohol, coffee, or Red Bull, and I'm GMing, so my throat is getting drier and drier. So I've just been I finished off my my water for early on, and then I'm reaching for the Red Bulls when my throat gets too dry, and I'm pacing myself. I'm pacing myself as much as I can. And about towards the end of my last session for the day, my heart is just like thumping. I can sort of feel pain in my chest, and I'm just like,
Ooh.
No, this is bad. I'm going to become a statistic and a CNN headline story. We're going to cut off the Red Bull now, and then we are going to address this at a later time.
But in the Hunger Games scenario, if there were Red Bull fridges all over the place, how would that affect the competition?
Somebody would die by Red Bull fridge being dropped on them.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say heart attack, but people would weaponize the Red Bull fridge. Interesting.
Well, like I said, it's going to last 20 minutes. It takes longer than that to drink enough Red Bulls in order to have said heart attack.
So I saw the panoramic image that you posted to your Facebook wall of the location, and it looked great and it looked rustic and like a really cool atmosphere to run a gaming convention. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like it didn't just look rustic. This practically felt like a cabin in the woods.
Yeah, oh no, it felt like somebody put a weird trendy dance hall in the middle of the worst place in Louisville, which is exactly what it was. Like some college art house project, but it evidently was successful and always open.
I'm going back to that picture because I don't remember it looking trendy. I remember it looking like an old English pub.
Yeah, that's sort of what they were going for, but then you walk through the other room and it's just like got disco balls and like a huge dance stage, blaring house music with laser lights, and like my table was not in the laser light area.
Okay. But were some tables in the laser light area?
The board games were back over there.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah. Though they did have a weird Jenga tournament over in our area, and we thought that's odd for a gaming convention to have a Jenga tournament.
Were they playing it by the rules?
They were playing it by the rules, as written.
So people were balancing the board against their elbows?
People were doing pinches and all kinds of crazy stuff. Like, those did not look like legal Jenga moves to me.
All right, then they're playing it by the rules. which again, yeah, when I found out those Jenga rules, I was very confused. So looking at the picture, it looks like there's a nice art section. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, there was a huge amount of art section, and all the art was for sale. Like, it sort of doubled that. Like, when you walked down one of the hallways towards, like, the coffee house, they had, like, permanently set in art spaces, like, that artists could rent out for semesters. It looked like it was a lot of student artists. So, like, there was a lot of custom painting on the walls. You'd walk by, and somebody was actually painting people at the time when you were
Cool.
walking by, and then there was like one of the vendors was just somebody from the college that managed the space, like just like selling the art that was for sale. And a bunch of it was, they did have a bunch of like really nerdy based ones picked out because it was a gaming convention. It was kind of cool. Like, I'm just saying it's unusual. It wasn't bad. It's just like I've been in a lot of conventions now, and I'm used to certain environments. I'm used to, like, you either get like the hotel that's been converted, it's conference space into, gaming convention. I guess that's the most common. Or, like, this is the basketball arena civic center that gets
Mm.
converted into a con space. I see that a lot. I see this is like the abandoned shopping center that gets turned into a convention space sometimes.
Never seen that one. That sounds kind of cool.
Well, I mean, if you want a game in a big empty Walmart with curtains for walls, then it works.
I
And then, but
guess
this is
I
the first
don't.
time. This is the first time I've ever been in the convention space that was just like, yeah, if this was any other place, there'd be a bouncer at the door that wouldn't let me in.
We have very different ideas of a trendy, like, art house bar then, because like everything you're saying makes sense until you start bringing the trendiness into it. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying we have different definitions. So how many tables were running Pathfinder? Pathfinder slash
Oh, we
Starfinder.
had 12 GMs, and we all had tables. I guess there were 10 tables total, with so that there are at least a couple of breaks available. We ran 2 slots on one day and then 1 slot on the next day. So, uh, I guess that's a whole lot of sessions of Pathfinder and or Starfinder. It was, I think it was 5 and 5.
Hmm.
So 5 Starfinder tables, 5 Pathfinder tables running at any given time. Now, we did not have full attendance. There was plenty of room at both of my tables that I ran. I didn't have to run all 3 slots. We each ran 2 slots so that we had a break slot to do whatever we wanted in.
Okay.
And
And what kind of stuff were you doing?
I ran the same session over and over and over again, which was the confirmation.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you?
Starfinder 1-01.
Oh, a Starfinder confirmation.
Yes, yes. So it wasn't a Pathfinder thing that I had to do the Starfinder stuff. I'm
This
saying
is the
had
one with
to.
the pop music.
Yes, well,
Okay.
the thing you need to understand is, yes, it is the one with the pop music section, but that pop music section is sort of a running subplot that's being peppered through a lot of the adventures in Starfinder.
Sorry, Lucas is in chat saying it's the commencement.
Okay, yes, commencement. I always get it
Okay.
in confirmation. Sorry, yes, it is the commencement, and it was real fun. Like, I put like all my A game on here. I had all my maps printed out, cut out to scale, and mounted to black foam core. That's a pretty standard thing. I brought my music with me so that I had full Sirenscape going the whole time, except for
Nice.
certain sessions when I opened with the Tron 2014 soundtrack. So like his name is Flynn starts opening up with this like really nice music going off to open it up, and then go into Sirenscape, and then of course when they encounter the area with Strawberry Machine Cake in it. There's 2 popular songs. I'm using Sugar Rush from the Wreck It Ralph soundtrack, which is
Nice.
this Japanese pop song with the Sugar Rush as the chorus. But the other one I hear the other GMs are using is Baby Metal's "Give Me Chocolate." So
Okay.
those two both work really well. I prefer the Sugar Rush because people usually recognize Baby Metal instantly, and they don't always recognize Sugar Rush instantly.
What? Sugar Rush was so catchy.
Yes, but it only appeared very briefly in the actual movie.
Oh, okay. Maybe. Well, it left an impression on me.
Yes, yes. And then I did something I never did before: puppets.
Yes, tell me about the puppets.
Okay, so I took all of the main characters that had art that you would meet throughout the adventure, and I printed out 2 copies of them on cardstock. And then I printed them out as full page printouts of their busts. So I cut them out once, just like a standard, and then I rigged up using papercraft techniques. I rigged up a stand so that they were freestanding busts, like 2D busts, and then I
Hmm.
cut out just their heads, and then I did another papercraft, and I took those heads, slightly enlarged them, and then moved them out about an inch forward, so that they were basically like pop-out book heads, if you can imagine. And then if you just wiggle it, their heads move when you're talking. And so
That's
that was my
awesome.
puppets. So when they met Ziggy, this big old like huge alien head with big antenna puppet shows up, and I just wiggle it, and his head moves as I'm doing the Ziggy voice, and then then just change up my voice when they switch over to the Vesk with his big deep lizard man voice, as opposed to
I,
my Ziggy voice, because you need to go get the album for me, yes please.
I recommend anyone that's listening to go check out the Facebook page because this is one of the pictures you posted,
Mm-hmm.
and you've really you've described it perfectly. I really can picture how you're using it. The bobbling of the head really sells the whole thing. I'm really excited about this. Actually, I might have to steal this at some point.
Please still. I will warn that 2 days of the convention they did not survive. So
Yeah,
at
I
the
wouldn't expect them to.
they lasted through the games, and then they were so torn up I had to toss them out. I could probably do them much higher quality next time I make them, but I put these together like the night before the con. I printed everything out in advance, but I actually did the gluing and pasting it together. And well, kids craft glue sticks can do wonderful things, but survive a convention is not one of them.
The Facebook wants me to tag the human picture, but not any of the aliens.
There's no human.
Also, it doesn't want me to tag your face, but the human
There's no
pop up.
human. There's no human leader in
Oh,
Starfinder.
Android.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Historia 7. Yeah. I really love the faction leaders in the Starfinder Society. They have so much character. They have their relationships between each others. They have a lot of really good gimmicks. It's all a lot more defined than the faction leaders in Pathfinder Society. Now, eventually, over the years, they have become defined. Several of them have. Not every one of them is real recognizable, but like everybody knows the Paracountess. Everybody knows Coulson, except for now. I guess there's not going to be a Coulson around much longer because there's a big to do about who's going to replace Coulson as the Liberty's Edge leader. Everybody knew Torch. They went through the extra effort to make sure that the faction leaders have a huge impression, and throughout all the adventures, that personality just keeps coming out every time you're interacting with them.
Very cool. Wondering
Now,
if I have any other
that,
questions about this. Nope, carry on. What were you going to say?
so I was just going to say that while I was doing this and posting to our page about this tiny little convention in Kentucky that was exceedingly weird, you were at one of the biggest conventions, or at least the most paid attention to conventions this year, PAX Unplugged.
Yes, from what I've gathered, it was the second most attended gaming convention in North America this year. So in its first
Wow.
year, it already got past Origins, which is a convention with decades of history to it. But whereas Origins has had its issues over the last couple of years, and it's kind of recovering from that in the last few years, PAX Unplugged is a spin-off of PAX, PAX Prime, PAX East, PAX West. It's an international convention that started with the Penny Arcade guys. And this is their first tabletop gaming convention as opposed to video game convention, hence Unplugged.
Ooh.
I was attending with Blind Ferret, so I was working the whole thing, but I still had a few opportunities to get around and talk to some people and check out the Paizo presents.
So how was the convention? I mean, Penny Arcade Expo, PAX has sort of has gotten a reputation of being one of the best conventions to be at, and that's before it was board game based, when board gaming was just this huge part of PAX, but not the focus. So how was it?
Based on that, I will say there were fewer issues than you would find at a normal first-time convention, more than you would expect at a PAX. You would figure that they just come with like a knowledge of how to run events. This was not perfectly run like that.
Okay, what do you mean not
get the
perfectly run?
Yeah, I'll get the negative out of the way first because my overall experience was positive. I will say that. But one of the issues from a management standpoint is that they decided not to pre-register any games.
That's weird.
And that's not just open gaming. There were scheduled games that you could not register for until you were there and standing in line.
That's weird.
Yes, and so a lot of people spent a lot of PAX in line waiting for a game with no guarantee that they would get to sign up for anything. And it was to nobody's benefit. I guess it was to benefit of whoever was handling the logistics of PAX because they didn't have to do anything beforehand, and so they got a bit of a break leading into it. But attendees didn't like it because they wanted to be gaming. Some of them came from pretty far away to be doing that, and that was not a positive first impression of the convention. Obviously, the exhibitors weren't happy about it because it meant these people were not playing games, and playing games is good for exhibitors because potentially they're playing our games and might potentially come and buy our games. But they also weren't in the exhibit hall looking at the things we were selling. They were just in this dead space of not participating in the convention in any way, except that they're committed to that. So that was the biggest hit against it. Another complaint that I heard, and this was more from vendors and this was not PAX's fault, a lot of people were going to this convention because they were PAX fans or video game fans, and they wanted to see what a PAX board game convention would be. This was not the Origins or Gen Con crowd. I don't mean this derogatorily, but it was more of a casual gaming crowd.
Okay.
And so for my particular booth, that worked great because Orphans and Ashes is just the kind of game that will attract the eyes of a casual gamer. But one of the major issues that the other booths were having was that, unlike a Gen Con attendee, a casual gamer will go to a booth, demo the game, know he can get it for cheaper on Amazon, and will not buy it directly at the booth. So that's what was happening on a lot of the other, like the larger the exhibitor, the more likely people were going, taking advantage of the demo space, and not paying them. So it was a weird convention in that the little guy was doing better than the big guys.
That's weird. I guess you guys, Blind Ferret has the advantage that part of your primary audience would be the typical PAX attendee because Looking for Group is initially based off of the World of Warcraft fandom. So that is the typical gamer.
So you would think that, but I found that more people were just being drawn to the provocative name and the cool booth that we had set up. And there weren't a whole lot of people that were coming as like Penny Arcade fans and therefore also Looking for Group fans, and not like coming from like video games and therefore World of Warcraft fans. It really was most of the people that were sitting at a convention had no idea what Looking for Group was and were just curious what this fancy game with all the cool little miniatures was.
Well, I'm glad your game attracted then.
It was extremely successful from my point of view. Somer's going to hate that I'm telling this story, but I was more famous than Somer at this convention.
Oh no!
And and Will, these are my coworkers. Somer's my boss. Will is my coworker. Will loved every second of it because, like, as soon as we walked into the convention hall, Jenny Bendel was coming down the escalator. Jenny, you and I know her as Paizo's PR, and so we worked directly with her for the podcast. And so within a minute of walking into the exhibit hall, not even the exhibit hall, the building where the convention was, the convention center, I was having a conversation with somebody. And then we went up into the exhibit hall. I bump into Reaper Brian. We have a good long conversation because he just announced he was leaving Reaper. And a few minutes later, Eric Mona's walking by, so I have a conversation with him. And it was just like, people knew me. And the best one, actually, I guess it was a 1-2 punch where we were going for dinner. We get in the elevator. We're going down. The elevator stops. The door opens. Somebody steps in and is like, "Oh, hi, Ryan." And it was just a publisher that I had worked with for Board Game Bento, who just happened to remember me because at Gen Con the last year, we'd set up a thing, like a promotional thing at their booth. So I left a good impression on him, and he'd never met my boss. So even though he knew me through that side of work, I had no idea who my boss was. And like, Somer thought I was setting some of these up. And what was even better, then we go for supper, and we go like 4 or 5 blocks. We're nowhere near the hotels that were attached to the convention, and inside you've got Tanya and Matthew Calder and a gentleman that I met at the con. I forget his name, but basically some Pathfinder Society people that see me and wave at me through the window. And so like that first day, Somer couldn't escape people that knew me. And I will say that most people that know me like me, and so like people were quick to have a conversation with me or just like get my attention.
Yes.
And this
that sounds like it did much for job security.
Well, like 90% of what we sold was copies of Orphans and Ashes and the expansion. So even if Somer was that angry at me, and honestly he probably wasn't, he was probably outwardly angry, but inwardly like trying to figure out ways that he could exploit this to make money. But yeah, like, so on a personal level, people will recognize me, and that was just fun for the ego. Professionally, Orphans and Ashes made a killing, and then Sunday was a slow day, which was my opportunity to go around and make Board Game Bento connections. And for the first time ever, people knew what Board Game Bento was and were very happy to talk to me. I have made a lot of effort to make sure that we are a very professional and mutually beneficial subscription box. Right. And I know I'm just kind of, it sounds like company line, but this is something I've taken a lot of pride in, and I make sure every Board Game Bento is a box that I would want to subscribe to. And the word's getting out there that like, we're the professional ones, we're the good guys to talk to, we're the ones that are not going to put pressure on you if you just can't meet our margins, because it's just, we don't want to hurt or we don't want people giving us our games for below what it costs them, and we're realistic about it, and people appreciate that. So anyway, like, just day after day, this was definitely the Costello convention. And so from that aspect, it was great. From a Paizo aspect and Pathfinder aspect, which I think people are probably a little more interested in, it was a strange convention.
Really strange?
So they had a Paizo booth set up, and it had, I would say, a dozen demo tables. Okay. Seemed like they were full the whole time. And then there was also not open gaming, but like registered gaming going on in, I believe it was 3 other rooms that also had at least a dozen tables each. So there was a good amount of Pathfinder Society going on at any given time. There was no product for sale.
What?
Why? There was no store. So
are you not allowed to sell on the floor?
Absolutely, you are allowed to sell on the floor. That's the whole point of the floor. They were just running a booth that was only demoing, and the long-term hope was that it was building more of the community and exposing people, and especially exposing casual gamers is the bread and butter of this kind of thing, exposing them to Pathfinder and Starfinder. But it was also that this was a bit of a last-minute addition to the Paizo convention schedule, and so instead of like trying to desperately organize and ship off books and not know if Ultimate Wilderness would be in time and be able to ship, and not know how much stock, because it's a brand new convention, so there was really no way of knowing by the time those shipments had to be planned and sent out. There was no way of knowing what would be popular and how much stock to send. So they were just like, forget it, we're skipping that step.
That's weird.
It is weird.
But I guess that they don't mind too much that people would be Amazoning.
I think they would prefer that people were going to their online store. And actually, I was talking to Eric about it, and I was like, so are you handing out like promotional codes so people can go to the store? And he was like, we should have. Great idea. Didn't.
If nothing else, they should have had a little kiosk where, here, buy here, right now, sit here, fill out this form, and they will mail it to you.
Yeah, that's true. They could have just had an online store. You don't have to manage stock for that.
Right. You just like, order sent. Just like a whole field of iPads and smiley people in Smurf shirts. This is a good time to mention that No Direction is always filmed live in front of a Twitch audience. If you're in our Twitch chat, please ask questions during the show. We will get to the questions throughout the show and answer them. Since this is a more of a bantery episode, we don't have a specific topic for the questions today. So just anything goes, guys. Anything that at least, we can air on radio.
I've just added a shout out because we've transitioned away from something, but I want to give James his due. So I'm giving a shout out to James. This is just a preview that there will be a shout out to James, and I'll explain more later. Param, you'll be happy to know I played my first Starfinder. Well, I'm not even used to saying it yet. I played my first Starfinder game finally.
Yes. So how did it treat you?
It was the first quest in the quest line, so it was only a couple of hours game.
Okay.
Matthew Calder, who is a venture officer, he's the guy that recognized me at the restaurant. Mm-hmm. He had offered to run some kind of Starfinder for me at any time, so we met up a couple hours before the exhibit hall opened on the Saturday.
Okay.
And Will joined me. My coworker Greg would have also joined me, but he got the plague early and awfully. Oh. So he needed as much sleep and medicine and whatever he could get, and minimal gaming. So Will and I were both playing. We were given the option to either go straight to the space battle,
right?
The space battle quest in the quest line,
to
just do the first part in the quest line, which is. Yeah. Go ahead.
The quest line has 5 quests, and one of them, it's just like traditional Pathfinder quest where you've got a role playing section and then an actual gameplay. Usually have a role play section, a puzzle, and a combat, and then one of them is just, hey, let's do starships and fight in space. And so you skip that one.
Well, it was offered to me, and then it was basically, it's like, do you want to dive into the most different part of Starfinder, or do you want to start at the beginning and see all the subtle ways that Starfinder is different from Pathfinder, but miss the big one? So we ended up going with that second option of starting with the first part of the quest. And I liked it. I liked Starfinder quite a bit. There was some nice streamlining. There's fewer first-level issues, I felt. I was playing... what is the cleric? It's the Mystic?
The Mystic! Yes. Okay,
so he was one of the 2 players I was playing. The other one was the Solarian. That Solarian NPC is weird.
Yeah, I usually try to tell people maybe not the Solarian is your first experience with Starfinder. The Solarian as a game class can be done well, but that particular pre-gen is famously built badly.
Yes, so he had almost the exact same armor and hit points as my Mystic, which the Mystic was not a frontline character. So and I was at the end of it, my Solarian nearly died, and the combat was not difficult. And everyone else, all the 3 other characters, Will was playing the engineer.
Okay,
who was his other character?
That would
be
the
android. The android's
mechanic and the operative.
Sorry, mechanic, not engineer. Yeah, he was playing the mechanic and the operative. Got the gist of both classes very well, learned to play them, was using his drone very effectively, and looked like a lot of fun. That was probably the most fun I've seen someone have with a pet class, really using a utility pet. Well, in the same, people don't use familiars. Familiars are basically stuffed in a bag. Yes. People use animal companions more for combat than anything else I've seen. So, to see a utility pet used very well, logically, well built, well thought out, that was really exciting for me. Meanwhile, the Solarian gets into melee combat and is just getting beaten up by a goon, and I was looking at it, it's all right, so here are the cool things I can do, but they're not that cool, and they take 4 rounds to set up. This is kind of cool, the lightsaber type weapon, but it's it's not that different from any other weapon mechanically. It's got a cool flavor, but I might as well have just been swinging a staff.
Right. The thing here is the Solarian pre-gen tried to demonstrate all of the aspects of the Solarian, whereas when you're building a Solarian and you want to build a good Solarian, and I'm not saying just optimize, hyper optimize, but really you want to decide if you're going to be a ranged character or a melee character and pick which way you focus. So if you're going to go with the lightsaber weapon, then you want to, get heavy armor and build your character towards strength and, be a melee character. And then
Yep.
you can do quite well, very cool stuff with a Solarian as a melee character. But if you want to be a ranged character, you make instead energy armor, so you don't need to get armor proficiency. You pick up a rifle and you become a super ranged character, and that's also a good build. But the pre-gen, love it to pieces. It tries to do both, but because it's so multi-attribute dependent, it isn't able to put the stats where it needs to be to do both, and so it just basically, man, it just dies. Is what happens to it. It goes up in the melee. It gets up the melee and then it just gets killed.
And it's got the two kind of spell-like abilities, and one of them is draw people closer to you.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one I started to set up, but they had no issue getting close to me.
No.
I guess that's useful if you're in a gunfight, but it also doesn't bring them that much closer, so I'm not sure how that ability scales, but at first level it didn't have any much use.
That's a much better one if you build it like a tank and you want to get all the people on you.
Sure. And then the other ability starts with, it was basically a grenade, and my cleric had a grenade, or my mystic, so it was like, yeah, this thing that takes you 4 rounds to do and you can only do once, I could just throw a grenade. Like, I can do that at any time that I want.
The mystic can kill people with tomatoes, and I have seen it happen.
What?
It's got one of the abilities the mystic has is a telekinetic throw attack.
Oh, yes.
One of my players just happened to be carrying a bushel full of tomatoes for reasons that might spoil one of the scenarios, and it was just like, tomatoes count as a solid object, and I'm like, yeah. Tomato attack! Boom!
Oh, just to make fun of the Solarian pre-gen one more time. So he's I forget the name of the race, but the 4-armed race.
Okay.
Nothing about that build made me feel like I had 4 arms.
Nothing about that race makes you feel like you have 4 arms.
What? But the Pathfinder version does.
Yeah, the Starfinder and multi-attacking is weird. It's just part of the system. Eventually, there's ways that you can sort of flavor that and get a slight advantage when you're doing multiple wielding in the system. But as it is, Cryptowalker, talking about the Kasatha. But the system really doesn't support the multi-arms means multi-attacks. Almost nothing helps you do multi-attacks. There's almost no point to dual wielding at all, because the system makes no differentiation between getting extra attacks with one weapon and getting extra attacks with 2, except for a single feat that gives you a +1 bonus to your attacks if you are actually using 2 weapons when you try to make multiple attacks.
Okay, but multiple arms doesn't just mean multiple attacks. It could mean that you can retrieve things more quickly, you can carry more weapons and consider wielding them. Like, there's a lot of different things. Yeah, you're allowed to do all that. Okay, that just was not made clear on the pre-gen character sheet, or maybe it was and I was more focused on the Solarian side of it.
Oh, yeah, no. It's just you have 4 arms, you're allowed to put anything in those 4 arms. It's just...
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like apply logic and have fun.
Right. Like I often see, because my Kasatha players, they'll be like, I've got an ice gun in this one, and a fire gun in this hand, and a kinetic one in here, and the grenades on this hand. And then it's just like, wow, you've loaded for bear. The system also, man, I'm getting into like deep Starfinder talk, but the system also rewards you hanging on to your equipment rather than selling it off, just by the way the economy works. So you will often have like a variety of weapons to choose from, and it also incentivizes that different weapons are better in different situations. So it kind of supports like the first-person shooter syndrome of like, okay, give me that gun. Okay, give me the ice gun. No, give me the shotgun. We need the grenade launcher. And there's a reason you would want to have those 4 arms with all those guns.
Okay. The probably the thing I liked the most about Starfinder Society is the boon slots.
Yes.
So I don't know how familiar people are with this, but in Pathfinder you get boons every time you pass a scenario. You get a chronicle sheet. Sometimes it has boons. Sometimes you just get random boons for showing up at the right place at the right time. Sometimes they have them on the website. You can end up with just a big stack of boons, a lot of which are very situational, and a lot of which are very hard to keep track of. And I've got character sheets that are my boons and chronicle sheets outnumber my character sheet by like 5 to 1. You know what? That's even underdoing it. Maybe 10 to 1. And I rarely, if ever, use them. So the fact that in Starfinder you have a limited number of boons and they are specialized to different locations, and you set them not even at the beginning, like not even before the scenario, but after getting the quest.
Right.
Everything about that works for me.
That's the best part. Is like you slot them, but you wait until your faction leader says, "Hey, here's what's up. Here's where you're going," and then you're like, "Okay, well, I'm just going to slot all my boons that are help me on the desert planet, and since we know it's guarded by android cat people robot ships, then I'm going to slot my huge ion cannon starship boon so I can mount this onto my extra starship." It's so fun. You also get to slot your faction at that point in time. So in Starfinder, a big deal is that you don't permanently pledge to one faction. You represent a faction every adventure, and you get to pick who you rep after listening to the adventure pitch. So you can just like say, I'm going to slot the boon that lets me rep the data files for this one because it's really cool and data file related. Or you can say, well, I need to get more reputation up with the Exo Guardians, so I'm going to slot the Exo Guardians in this slot today.
Now, I've been thinking hard and often about how to retrofit that to work with Pathfinder Society, and it just feels like Pathfinder Society, it's too big and it's unwieldy. So unless there were like expiration dates on the existing boons and they just started fresh at one point with the beginning of a new season, it's just something that Starfinder gets to have that's better than Pathfinder Society.
Yeah, I mean, it would take a full reboot of the Society. Like if there ever is a PF2, I kind of see that happening.
So instead, one thing I hope to one day do is take all my characters, get little tabs, and just write the word that any situational bonus is situational to. So if it's like Aspis, and anytime the GM brings up Aspis, I'll go like, oh no, go through the tabs. Okay, that's not this character. Or maybe it is this character, and I get to do something cool because there's an Aspis Consortium guy. Yeah. Because that is the closest to making boon slots, is just making it feel like some kind of a slot is being occupied.
Right. And sometimes they do get kind of ridiculous. I mean, I love Pathfinder Society so much so that I'm an officer. But it does get ridiculous because some of those boons are like, you get an extra +2 to diplomacy roll when encountering gnolls in the jungle on a Thursday.
Yeah. Well, there was an infamous one that was a bonus against orcs, I think it was also in a specific environment. And for the first 5 seasons, there are no orcs in Pathfinder Society. Or maybe there was one scenario.
I can't even think now of any orcs in Pathfinder Society. They're so rarely used.
Yeah, there was at least one season. Which one was it? The one with that 3-parter that was very dwarf-centric?
Oh, the Skyski.
Year of the Sky Key?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's at least that trilogy has a lot of orcs.
Right, because there's the Hold of Belkzen, and that's when Iron Fang Invasion, not Fang Invasion, but the Iron, the Giant Slayer. Giant Slayer was happening because that takes place in Belkzen.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. So those are the most famous examples of orcs, and like before those scenarios came out, people were constantly like, when do I ever use this boon?
Yeah, no, never. I mean, I kind of wonder how they invent these. Next time we get one of the Society team on the show, we need to ask them, how do you make boons? When do you decide to make boons? Like, is this ever planned, or you just like say, someday we're going to have a flump invasion maybe, so we're going to have anti-flump boons here.
Finally. Teach those flumps what for.
They're going to come down, they're going to try to be super helpful, and we're going to want none of it.
Param, I forgot to ask you, was there anything for sale at your convention near Louisville?
Yes, but I never got to see it. By the time my slots ended and I wandered over towards where the single booth with stuff for sale was, I had no idea what was available there or not.
Oh, really? Like it was just all covered up in blankets and
they were gone.
Was talking?
They were gone.
Okay.
Yeah, it was over in that other room with the lasers and the bar.
Nice. Well, there Although Paizo wasn't selling stuff, there was obviously plenty of booths with a lot of options and a lot of interesting games and whatnot for sale. None of which I can talk about because anything that was at that con could potentially one day be in a board game bento. So I'm not going to talk about the board games, but I am going to talk about. I'm sorry, Para, confidentiality. It is a mystery box for a reason. So I did pick up something super cool.
Oh,
super expensive.
I know what's in that thing.
I did post a picture of it on our Facebook, and in case the post wasn't clear, this was not sponsored. This is something I paid for out of my own pocket, which I was willing to do because I was on such a high at that convention for just how well things were going for me.
I really want one of those, man, but how much does that cost? It was too much at Gen Con.
Let me show you everything that I got, and then I'll explain the cost.
Okay.
So this is from Elderwood Academy. At one point when they had a Kickstarter, we did give them a shout-out, but it's been a while. So this here looks like a scroll tube.
Yes.
It's real leather. It's got a cool print. There's several patterns, so this wasn't hand-etched like somebody suggested, but still, it's very finely worked wood, very finely worked leather. There's two gimmicks to this. The first one is that the top opens up, and I've got another thing inside here.
Okay.
So this, effectively my scroll, opens up.
Make sure you show the camera.
Oh, sorry. So I have, this is a dice tray.
Oh,
Give me a second to
looks
put
like
it
a
together.
piece of leather.
It is a piece of leather with woodworking around it, because once again, that's their thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just assemble. This is not normally supposed to be done in the air, so if it looks a little bunchy, it hasn't been when I used it in the past. All right, so here we go.
Okay, cool dice tray. I like cool dice trays.
The scroll tube, you don't just put it aside now.
Okay.
The bottom shifts, and it is now a dice tower.
Does it have tumblers in it?
Tumblers? No, it's just a hole.
Okay.
Do dice towers normally have tumblers?
Yeah, and dice towers usually have objects to the dice bounce off of to help increase the randomization.
Okay. Well,
but that's still cool.
I would lose the effect of being able to stuff the scroll in there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it fits nicely into a corner.
Uh-huh.
I now have a dice tower and dice tray, something that I've wanted a dice tray for a long time, and I've wanted some fun wood thing. I always figured I would get it from Dogmite, but as much as I like the stuff online, whenever I go to the Dogmite booth, I just kind of walk around, look around, and it's like nothing is speaking to me. Whereas this, I found, the skull kind of works for my Oracle of Bones, and then I found like just the cool magical etchings, and it was like, all right, the colors match, the theme matches. It's cool. It's vaguely practical for such an expensive purchase, which I should say the pair of them was $140 American.
That's not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Oh, I should have had you guess. Did you have a number in mind?
I thought it was going to be 200.
It was about 200 Canadian when you do the conversion. I think it was
That's
190.
That's Canadian money.
It's what I make.
Yes.
It's my money. Effectively, it's what I eventually spend.
Eventually.
So yeah, this was something that I saw the way one stuffs into the other. I saw just how cool everything looks. And I was like, I got to think about this because this is a ridiculous purchase. This is basically my month's budget spent on a single item that honestly does not fill a void as much as it is just would be neat. And it was probably about 5 minutes of thinking before I was like, man, that is exactly what I want right now. And so it was like, it wasn't an impulse buy. It was something that I put thought into, and it did not take me much thought before I was convinced I am okay with this expensive purchase. This is the most expensive accessory in my collection, will most likely be the most expensive accessory ever in my collection. And I'm okay with that. I think that it's not just like a flash in the pan kind of thing where like, it isn't a fad. This is a finely crafted piece. It will always look good, even if I start, when I eventually drop it and it starts getting dinged up. I think that's still going to add to the, it still works as a well-adventured scroll tube or scroll case. I got to use it on Monday, and you can see over my shoulder we've got you can't see because there's a baby chair. We've got the digital table that takes up a big chunk of the real estate on our table there. So having my dice in a nice compact dice tray that made the game run that much more smoothly.
Yeah. On the exact opposite end of scale of your epically awesome scroll tube / dice case / I don't know what else to say. Dice bin.
Yes.
Okay, so the I have found, especially at this convention, where they put us at the tiniest tables you can imagine, and tried to put 7 people around something smaller than your average card table.
Hmm.
Um, because evidently weird dance club art galleries don't usually have convention tables in them. So the $15 Pathfinder dice tray that they sell, the official one,
Yep.
that folds up and slips into my bag, was invaluable for the same reason. Just for having this tiny little space, being able to roll into a dice tray that I can trust that my dice aren't going to go everywhere in this convention space, and it also, I'm very clumsy, so my dice usually go flying several times during a game session. Dice trays are awesome. And I tried crafting some, I've tried doing other work, but just that fold up dice tray is just perfect for throwing in my con bag. And it's like $15, best $15 I've spent this year.
Excuse me. I am definitely on board with that. The compact nature of this was an extra selling point for me, and it is cool to hear that the Pathfinder one is collapsible, because the dice trays I've seen before that, it's mainly just been like a wooden hexagon that has a felt finish on the inside.
Right. And
So it's a bit clunky. It takes up a fair amount of real estate.
You
Oh,
know why they're wooden hexagons?
now that you mention it, no.
Okay, you can get that wooden hexagon at any given craft store or in the crafts slash decoration section of any given Target or Walmart in the States. And so you grab this wooden bowl that is meant to be something you throw like rocks and decorative stuff in as part of
Oh,
a home decor solution, and they get that thing and they glue a piece of cheap felt into it, and they sell it for about 4 times the price they pay for it.
I see. What if it has something fun etched into the felt?
Well, then they've done above and beyond what I've seen most of them do. But if you want to make your own one of those, like seriously, it's like $5 worth of material, and you can build it in like 10 minutes. I recommend you should try to exercise your crafty side. I will also say that the Pathfinder dice tray is not actually even a dice tray. It's a men's collapsible valet tray that has Pathfinder printed on it. So
What is a valet tray?
if you go to Amazon.com and you search for a men's valet tray, as
Okay.
in, let me. Okay, so if you just go onto Amazon, you can get a leather collapse. It's the collapsible valet tray. Here we go. $10 on Amazon for one of these things. They come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. This isn't the only one. You can get them low as $5, but it's the same basic concept. It's a piece of leather that just folds up and snaps together. That's all this is. The Pathfinder one is. I'm posting a link in chat to one of these. The
I'm
Pathfinder
still
one
not
just
sure
has
what the
Pathfinder in it.
original purpose
Okay,
of a valet tray is.
you put this in your bag when you go traveling. That's why it's collapsible. And then you put your wallet and your keys and your change into it so that it's all in one place when instead of just thrown around.
Yeah, okay.
They make permanent ones of these, like meant to just be going in your house, so you can throw your wallet and your keys and your wristwatch and your other I don't know what to call them as a group of objects, but the stuff you keep in your pockets regularly. You can
Sure.
just throw
Your
it in an
personal
organized
effects.
place, as opposed to just dropping them on the counter somewhere.
So this one's $7.99. The official Pathfinder one is $15, you said?
Yeah, yeah, or at least it was at Gen Con when I bought it.
I think it's worth the extra money.
Yeah, it's cool. The Pathfinder one's a bit bigger than the ones I see at like the local like Sears and other men's stores. You can at luggage shops, luggage stores usually have these available at them.
Makes sense.
The Pathfinder one's a little bit bigger and it has Pathfinder printed on it, so that was worth the extra money.
Speaking of, bigger and too big, my one regret is that the Paizo D20 does not fit. It fits in the top, but it doesn't fit through the door.
No,
I know. So I was rolling all my tiny d20s. Actually, one point it hit the corner just right, so it popped open. That I don't know how well I was showing how the corners locked together. So it unlocked a corner and actually did fall off the table. But that was only one roll, and I'm going to call it a 1 in 100 rolls. We'll see. I'll report back as I continue to use this.
Big plastic D20. That nothing's
No,
designed.
that was with my regular size D20 going through the tower.
Oh, that's not good.
It's because when you put it in a corner like I have in the picture, which is how I just think it looks the nicest, it means that the door, or, the spout, the whatever, the opening, is aimed right at the corner, which means that there's a chance that if it goes straight when it lands, it will go straight for the corner, and we'll give it enough pressure to pop it open. So if I just make it slightly skewed and have it going towards one of the long edges, should be fine. But I will report back after I've used this for a couple of weeks.
It looks amazing, man. I bet, and just setting that down and unfolding that contraption and getting it ready at a convention table must just feel incredibly awesome.
Yeah, well, I've revealed it to my gaming group. I didn't tell them what was coming. I just boom, here's a velvet bag. Open it. Here's a cool wooden thing. Open it. Another velvet bag. I think that's what really sells it. That it's a velvet bag within a velvet bag within
I've got
a cool wooden contraption.
Suggestion for you to take this to one more step further.
A metal case.
No.
Okay.
That would be cool also. Or a custom
with dry ice.
That's also cooler than what I was going to suggest.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Get some parchment paper, printable parchment paper. Print your character's spell list on it, and then roll those up and put them in your tube.
Ooh.
So it is really your scroll case.
That is pretty cool. And I'm an oracle, so I've only got so many spells. Yeah. Param, I think you're onto something.
Yay.
You know what? My brother, it's been a while, but in high school, he, as a hobby, studied calligraphy. I wonder if he's still brushed up on it. I wonder if he could give me a cool calligraphed, my spells, at least my spell list written out fancy lettering.
Well, what I would do is I would just print the spell, most of the spell, but not its title, and then calligraphy the name.
Okay, that works.
I would volunteer my calligraphical services, but that'd be mailing it back and forth between America and Canada.
I mean, could I just get you to buy the parchment and then print it, and then I'll pay you after you mail it the one time?
Yes. And you don't need to pay me, and I don't need to buy the parchment because I keep that stuff on hand. It's right there. I keep hundreds of sheets of it because I like to print my RPG notes on that stuff and put it in my big leather notebook because custom leather notebooks are great.
We will continue this at another time, and if we do, if this is something we end up doing, then I'll share it on Facebook.
Yay! Yeah, I studied calligraphy too because I wanted to make cool gaming props, and then I bought calligraphy pens.
Cool. I have no idea why my brother studied it. He just found it interesting.
But hey, if you need to bond nerdy with your brother, go that direction.
Maybe.
Oh, well.
He and I both have... He's the Canadian champion Irish dancer. He has his own strange set of hobbies and stuff. We get along swimmingly. It's just, as weird as we both are and as much as we obsess over our own hobbies, the hobbies rarely cross over.
All right. So what's next?
Let's see. Oh, I did make one other purchase. It's almost more of a shout out, but so there was a book on Kickstarter, I'm going to say a couple of years ago, called The ABCs of RPGs. It's a kid's book. And I saw it at the con. I've seen it on, I believe it's on ThinkGeek. So I've seen it in the ThinkGeek newsletter that I get. And it's all right, the art appeals to me. It's a cool concept, but a kid's book really has to, it has to have either a rhythm or it has to have something, the writing can't just be basic writing. It has to be basic vocabulary, but used artistically to really sell me on it. Especially, this is a $15 book, so almost $20 Canadian, because it matters what it is in Canadian, Param. So this was my first time that I actually got to flip through it, and the art is consistently good. There's a nice, diverse variety of the main characters that you see consistently all throughout it, and girls in the power roles, which is always good because Scarlet is definitely that kind of girl, and like just racial diversity. Cool. So that was a good, like, that was a big check mark that I forgot to even have on my checklist. But reading through a couple of pages, it's like, no, this is a good cadence, a good rhythm. This is a well written, well drawn, and conscientiously like a created book that I'm very happy to have picked up and own. And it's in my, I've read it to Scarlett once, and then the next night she asked for Tina to read it. So it's leaving a good impression already.
Excellent. I have never considered that book as anything more than a slight giggle when I see its title.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I have
You have actual children that might benefit from a kid's book.
Yep.
You also wrote kids' books.
I did write kids' books. I didn't write this kind of kids' books. Mine were a little bit older. They're more in the storybook style.
Are you going to get them the baby bestiary?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Maybe.
That thing is adorable. And the
I
plushies
agree.
they've
I
made
thought
for
of
it
getting it
are
for
amazing.
myself. I will not be getting them the plushies. We are drowning in plushies, and for Christmas we have to convince Scarlett that it would be really nice if she gave away like 75% of her plushies, since she only seems to care about a couple of them.
Oh, that always works with children. Do you want to give away most of your toys?
I will get back to you about how it works, but I suspect that Scarlett will be generous if we frame it the right way. She is a good kid.
Are you like trying to just push her into the upper alignment brackets very forcefully?
If only there could be lawful good barbarians.
I'm going to demand that next to her height chart, you get the alignment detailed progression chart and just like start notching it next to her. Here you are at age 12 when you were lawful, when you were halfway between lawful and lawful neutral.
Jacob Blackwood's recommending Dungeon Alphabet by Goodman Games. I'm not familiar.
I have that book.
Games. Oh, do you? Okay, cool.
I have
What's
no
the
idea
age
where
range,
it's
do you
at.
figure?
Adult.
Oh, okay.
It's more of a nerdy curiosity in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. It's like F is for flump. You get the idea. G is for gelatinous cube.
Okay, because yeah, this one is more like A is for the adventures. May you always be on one, and it's like it's very much a kid cadence. And I don't have the authors handy, but otherwise I would credit them. So that's, actually I skipped kind of giving an overall impression of PAX Unplugged, or kind of like painting the picture of it, because it was the way it used its space was really strange or different. Anyway, so. The exhibit hall was the exhibit hall / the open gaming area / the competitive gaming area. So the competitive gaming was on one side. Open gaming took up a lot of the main hall. And then there was the exhibit hall, which was maybe 10th the size of the Gen Con exhibit hall.
Okay.
But it was densely packed. So if you were just standing in one aisle, you could fool yourself into thinking that it almost had a Gen Con feel to it. And like there was just something about the echo and like the din of it that it did feel like a crowded, busy, large convention. But it's once you're walking the exhibit hall and then you're suddenly on the last aisle, it's like there really was not that many people here.
Okay, so but if it was the second most attended, how's it there not that many people?
Okay, sorry, exhibitors. There's not that many exhibitors here.
Okay.
Which again was good for the exhibitors that were here, because it really did feel like every booth had to get a lot of attention, because at some point, even if you only were half interested in something, if it was something different and you had the 3D pass, odds are you gave it a look or listened to a spiel. And, we live or die by the spiels that we get to give, Param. You don't understand. They don't let us leave the country if we don't give enough spiels.
This was a convention that was within driving distance. It takes place in a town we have show members at.
Yes.
Did you get to meet up with James? I think he was at
All right, so James was going to be in the shout-outs. I'm shifting him back up to the main conversation. James saw me at the booth, and we only spoke briefly because, unfortunately, when I'm there on business, I don't even have my lunches and my dinners free, which everything is with the Blind Ferret group, and everything is about, strategy and whatnot, and reviewing the sales for the day, but he did drop by the booth and he said hi to me. And I was like, James, can you just repeat this conversation we just had in front of Somer? So not only did he repeat it, but he went huge with it. So I just kind of wandered next to where Somer was standing, and James was like, Ryan Costello? I was like, James, how are you? It's great. I'm like, do you know my boss, Ryan Somer? No!
You! Okay, I'm going to have to bookmark this timestamp and send it to Somer. Excellent, excellent. And thank you, James, for continuing to support Ryan's delinquency.
Well, and then there was another listener who, unfortunately, I didn't. So, when I asked him who he was, because he was like, I love your podcast, and we talked a little bit about it. And I was like, I'm sorry, who are you? And he was like, just a listener. I'm like, but do you have a name? And he said it quickly, and unfortunately, I didn't commit it to memory.
No!
And I know, I'm sorry. I believe it was Joe. So anyway, then I tried to do the same thing. I was like, all right, can we go over and have this conversation in front of my boss? But then what happened was I walk over and he has that conversation with my boss. He's like, oh, I love your comic. It's my favorite comic. And so I'm just kind of standing there grinning. And no, the best part was that Somer didn't know how to process this because he was so used to me doing this with other people recognizing me that when somebody was there, like recognizing him, and I was just kind of hovering and smiling, he was like, what is happening here? Like, no, I just love your comic. Thank you.
Okay, evidently I now know to insult Somer by loving his comic. I mean, I love his comic. I was a fan of his comic before I knew that was who you worked for.
I think he just felt my presence, and that's how he knew something was up, and he never figured out what that something was. Because honestly, what happened was not what I had originally planned, so it was even more fun. Like, it was a surprise for me as well.
Now, I really wanted to go to PAX Unplugged after it was announced, and then they announced the dates. I'm like, yes, it's nearby. Yes, I can totally drive there in under a day. And then I was like, no, it's the exact same weekend of a convention I volunteered to run at.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no. Though, to be fair, I had a pretty good time. I got to like hang out literally in a house with a dozen other venture asterisks. There were captains and lieutenants and agents there. And
oh yeah, agents. I forgot that was another rank.
Well, that's me. I'm agent. Yep. And
Agent
then there's
Agent
venture lieutenants, which are above me.
Yep.
And then the venture captain, the big hoss. And yeah, and that was Chad. He's does a great job with Kentucky. Super friendly. It was about as nerdy a situation as I've ever been in, and I've hung out at Gen Con with you.
Yeah, I was going to say you've been in some nerdy situations. Mm-hmm. One thing that might be more of interest to the two of us. Actually, no. First, I'm going to talk about. So, if you didn't go this year, that's fine because this convention was clearly designed to grow. Mm-hmm. So, all that open gaming area, it was not being used, and even if everyone that was in attendance was dedicated to open gaming, I think there was still more space than he needed. So, it's clear that next year, even if the exhibit hall or the exhibitor section of the hall doubles in size, there is space for it. And one thing that I thought was really cool was there was a commitment to Twitch and Twist Gaming, which is one of the biggest tabletop gaming Twitch channels out there. They had a booth set up and they were just streaming the entire convention. And I went on at one point on Sunday and plugged Orphans and Ashes, and that's what they did. They just booked up every half hour and had a guest on there talking about, basically, giving their spiel, talking about what they would have been talking about to attendees at the booth. And they weren't the only people that were doing live streaming from the exhibit hall. So I'm starting to wonder if that's going to be something that we see more often. That it like podcast Twitch channels, if they're going to start just setting up as themselves and take the opportunity to engage with their fans in that way. I don't know if that's something we could do because it is a major commitment of time, and we already, when we go to conventions, are committing a lot of our time to it. But It's something that I at least am like, is there something there that we could like at least do a portion of? Anyway, if that's the direction that PAX Unplugged is going, and PAX Unplugged kind of represents the next step in major gaming in North America, major gaming conventions. I am curious to see how that specifically evolves.
Well, I've totally been wanting to do like some sort of an official meetup live show or something with the fans for years now. It's just really hard for us to plan for something that, especially when you have to plan for something like that. It's like the beginning of the year, and also plan for the coverage that we have committed ourselves to doing every year. It's tough, and I don't know where that time would come from. But if this is something our fans want to do, if you guys want to come like at a Gen Con or a PaizoCon or a PAX Unplugged, PAX Unplugged might be the best one to do it at. Let us know if you want us to do something, if you want to participate in some sort of actual No Direction event, something like official and organized with our name on the door.
Darren Caldemeyer is asking, how does it look for Param to be at PaizoCon 2018? About the same?
Well,
I
might be, this is a terrible thing to say. I think I might be burning out on Gen Con.
Okay.
And I usually say I have to choose between going to Gen Con and going to PaizoCon. This might be the year that I choose to not do a Gen Con.
Okay. Now, I don't want to convince you, like, I don't want to change your mind, but there is a chance that this is Scarlett's first Gen Con.
Oh, well, that's different. I've got to see the Munchkin. We will see. We will see, Darren. There's a lot in the air about the future of con coverage and the network and all that jazz. We've got some things and plans and stuff, so we will need to. We do not have anything to announce at this point in time.
I will say that one of the advantages of this decision you have to make is that PaizoCon comes first and takes less planning. So by the time you have to make a decision about whether you're going to book a room and whatnot for Gen Con, you can make that decision about PaizoCon, which is a lot closer, and not worry about missing out on games and registration and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, the problem is PaizoCon cost a lot of money for airplane. And PAX Unplugged,
you can't drive. There's mountains in the way.
It's literally a week of driving.
No kidding. Your country.
Yeah. It takes a solid week of driving to get there. That's not something I want to do.
No, I don't blame you. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Because I do not know American geography.
But I can totally drive in under a day, and actually just a few hours, and get to Gen Con or PAX Unplugged.
Darren says it's 3 days tops.
I'm not going to drive 14-hour driving days. Jacob says it takes me 4 to 5 days. Well, he's in Oklahoma, going to Seattle. I'm even further away.
And you said a week. That's not that much longer than what he's estimating. So anyway, we're not the logistics of driving through the United States podcast.
This might be when we start to revitalize the concept of the train con.
Oh, man, train con.
Hillchat says, we're America and Canada, at least at one point, are exactly the same width. At least
the same
one
width,
point.
But there's nothing dynamic about Canada. It is an east to west country with a little bit of north to south variety, but 90% of our, or maybe it's not 90, but like 75% of our population is within what we like to call striking distance of the United States border. Like, we're right there. I think it's 75% of the Canadian population is within 6 hours of an American border. And so even though we've got the bigger country, most of it is along the same line.
Is most of Canada empty?
Most of Canada is frozen.
That's empty?
Yes, it is also. Well, okay, it's not completely empty. We've got Indigenous people take up a lot of the northern part. Okay, they don't take up a lot of it. Most of the population above a certain latitude is Indigenous people. I think the furthest north famous city, I forget if it's Calgary or Edmonton. I never remember which one is higher north in Alberta. But think of any famous Canadian city you know, and you can probably draw a straight line connecting all of them.
Okay, yeah. like I'm aware of where the major cities are and how close they are to the border. So I like. There's been multiple times I've mapped out the road to get to Montreal because of
Nice.
obvious reasons. It's about 11 hours worth of driving, so that's not too
Okay.
bad. I've done
Add
longer.
up to 3 hours for the border just to be safe.
Well, yeah, but I meant like physical distance. Like
Okay.
I did very recently. I drove 16 hours to Florida in a day, so that wasn't terrible.
Mm.
It was the 16 hours back while I had strep throat that I didn't know was
Ooh.
strep throat and was starting to hallucinate. That was bad.
Ooh. I didn't know strep throat had hallucinations involved.
There's some exaggeration there. Some. I was loopy as crap on the final stretch there, and I had to pull off for 2 hours just to sort of. Yeah, things went bad. Things went south. There was about a time last March where it was just like Param disappeared for 2 weeks from the planet. Um, Things went poorly.
Ooh. All right. Now, Twilight Knight is suggesting you rent an RV. So it's basically the train con idea, but off the rails.
Okay, renting an RV, the gas for the RV, all that
Yep.
jazz is plane ticket.
Split between a group, though.
I don't have a group that I'm going to be
Oh,
able
all
to
right.
take to PaizoCon. Not significant enough to do that.
And Darren Kaltemeyer says, never rent an RV with 3 exclamation points. All
No.
right.
Like I'll
Sorry, we
totally
didn't
do
mean to.
Amtrak just because Amtrak fun. But I'll fly before I drive that. I'm not gonna ever drive across the American countryside. I mean, you just get to a certain point, and then there's just a loading screen that says like the rest of America will be available in 4 days. I'm being really mean
That's,
to our
yeah.
flyover states.
No, Canada's the same way with what we call the prairies, the uh, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba, especially Manitoba. There's nothing in Manitoba.
All right. So, are we ready for shout outs?
Except maybe listeners. So hi, any listeners that
Oh,
are in
yeah.
Manitoba.
So, well, I made the mistake where I constantly bash St. Louis. So, and we have listeners in St. Louis that seem to get grumpy every time I do that. I love our listeners there. I just really, really don't enjoy being in your city.
All right. Well, before we get to shoutouts, let's see. Yeah, I think we've got a little bit of time for this. So, Paramount had a Pathfinder Society session.
Oh, Pathfinder
This is
Society.
completely
Yes,
unrelated
yes.
to conventions.
Mm-hmm.
It was what I would call a delightful, terrible session.
Oh boy, what was the adventure?
That's a good question. Well, anyway, it had nothing to do with the adventure. It had a little bit to do with how well prepared I was for it.
Mm-hmm. You're a player,
Uh,
right?
no, I was jamming.
Oh, well, that's bad.
This was in my the Blind Ferret group,
Mm-hmm.
and it included. Okay, so it was the new artist or the new in-house illustrator, Venetia. She agreed to come join us, and Venetia is 20 years old. And what's funny is that we calculated that she's only about 300 days closer to my age than she is to Scarlett's. So she's definitely the cub of the office.
Okay.
And one of our players, Louis, said that Venetia was a Dungeons and Dragons player, and so to invite her to Pathfinder one time. It ends up that she played like 2 sessions of Dungeons and Dragons in the 8th grade, and so it was like, oh, so I'm basically introducing you to role playing right now. All right, that's more pressure than I was expecting, but okay, let's do this. I gave her a bard, and I will say I was proud of what I did with. I took the Lem character sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And then I made a legend. I said like feats, spells, skills, and maybe equipment or special abilities. And then I took a different highlighter, highlighted each of those things, and then went over the character sheet. And it's like, here's your skills, here's your feats, here's your whatever. And so that way if we're in the middle of the session, and I'm like, roll for perception. No, not perception, because that's in 2 places. Anyway, like a knowledge or acrobatics, whatever. I could be like, that's a skill. And so she would look, it's like, okay, skills are orange. She looks over the sheet, she finds the orange section. She knows that that's skills, and it really narrows down a lot of the just wandering eyes over the character sheet. So that was the only proud moment I had that session. Here's 2 things that were going against me in that session. One, people were in a really social mood that night.
Oh,
And
boy.
so it took us a long time to get started, and this was a Friday night game. So like we were chatting. We were just really giving her some pointers. Anytime something would inspire a story, we would tell the whole story, and we would then have to give her backstory and explain how it all works in the game. And she was enjoying it, and everyone was having a great time. But man, was it derailing the session. The other thing is that for about 3 weeks, the reason we canceled the last episode, I had bronchitis, and I did not realize this. I just thought I had a cold, and that session was the peak of my bronchitis. And so, like, I was having trouble getting through a sentence without getting into like a dry, hacking cough. And I definitely, every time I laughed, it triggered a coughing response. And we were in a really good mood that night. So people were like making jokes. I was laughing and then dying. And then it was like, I'm constantly just trying to like lubricate my throat with water and 7-Up and whatever I can get my hands on. And so it was physically painful towards the end of it. And then I made a terrible mistake, because the scenario at one point calls for, it says like, if they get enough clues towards what they're working on, trigger this event. And I thought it was clues towards the identity of an NPC, and they discovered the identity of the NPC. So I was like, all right, it's time for the event. And then I quickly realized that it was like, oh no, there's another mystery that's going on that they're researching that they have barely scratched the surface of, because they were like laser vision onto who is this NPC that we're supposed to be researching, found his identity, had almost no information about the mystery, and this other event happened. And I'm like, now I'm having to improvise, and I'm having to like cram information they needed into the middle of an encounter, which involved swarms and a creature that was higher level than they should be facing, and he was only supposed to be taken on later on. So it was like, oh my god, this is the biggest mess of an encounter I have ever run, and I am slowly dying here. But I'm sure people noticed that this was not my smoothest scenario, but nobody complained, at least, because despite just everything going wrong from my end as a GM, we were having fun, and that trumped any of the problems that I was creating.
That is ultimately where it goes. I don't have that, man. That sounds like it's about as rough as it gets. But I've had multiple times where me and all the GMs are prepping. Like, when I run game nights, I make sure that when we have a game night at my store, it's the adventures, 3 GMs running the same table. Like, we don't offer a variety. We coordinate because, well, you've heard my rants on the subject of replaying and availability. So I have to very carefully manage what we offer. So unless there's a dire reason I'm not doing it, we all prep the same adventure, we all run the same adventure, all the players are on the same page, and we can keep track of everybody's progress. We had a run where we were running some early like season 1 stuff, and there was like a multi-parter. I forget which one it was at this point, but it was just like dungeon crawl after dungeon crawl. It was the one with like all the rat cult. I forget its name. It was like a 4 or 5 parter.
Oh, okay. I feel like I have played the first part of that, but it's not the. No, I'm drawing a blank.
The Devil You Know.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, okay. We run.
That is not the title I was thinking of, but I have played that one. Yeah. I forgot that I've played part 1 of multiple multi-parters and not any more than that.
So we ran the whole thing in order, and we were getting about part 3, and it's like this long dungeon crawl after long dungeon crawl after long dungeon crawl. And we're used to playing like more modern Pathfinder Society that have like, here's the roleplay session, here's the puzzle, here's this custom system rule for this particular section that you're going to have to learn. And it's kind of crazy that we put those in so many adventures lately. And this was just like pure dungeon crawly nonsense with like not much plot. Or at least the plot was super, super linear. And then we were going back and back to the same places again and again because the multi-parter keeps revisiting some of the locations. And me and the other GMs were like, man, this has got to suck. They've got to hate doing this. They're really going to do all 5 parts, all 4 parts. And it's like, this is like the 4th time we've had a bunch of rat fights in the same dungeon, in the same town. And we were all the GMs were basically like, man, we are so burnt out on this. They have got to be having a terrible time. We polled the players, and they're like, this is the best adventures we've ever run. Yes, it's awesome, man. The story is so complex. It's like, who did you like? And like, what story? was like, that cultist, man, there's something obviously going on with that cultist and his brother. And I'm like, how do you even know that? It's like, there's no choices. It's just one straight line. You couldn't fail this scenario if you tried. Can you announce that your character walks forward? Well, you win. But their point of view from the players, they didn't know any of this stuff. They didn't know it was super linear. They didn't know that it was just a one long dungeon crawl. They only knew what the player's perspective was, and so they thought we were just super well organized and there was so much going on that they were just getting details teased out, and like we were some diabolical masterminds. And at the same, while all the players are like, man, you guys must have like prepared this and it's so complex, and we're like, this is like the simplest thing we've ever done, and it's driving us mad that there's nothing complicated here. It's like every room is just like, and here's a room with more rats. Here's a rat swarm. How about a poison rat this time? That's a dude who controls rats. Rats! And it was just like, gosh, man, I loved it. I loved how it ended up at the end. The first part and the last part were actually pretty good, and they got through it, and all the players had a great time. And it's probably the least amount of prep we've ever had to put into anything. Like the most it took was just a lot of printing out maps to scale. That was like the total of prep, because it's just a dungeon. You enter room 3, and what's in here? 2 skeletons and a rat, and that's the whole thing. And
skeletons, nice variety.
Yeah, right, with the rat.
Yes,
because at all times there must be rats. And it was great. So the player's point of view, almost they never see the difficulties or the screw ups unless we let them see them. So I'm sure your players had a blast.
Actually, it does remind me. There's another funny story about that scenario. It's near Alkenstar. It takes place in the Mana Waste. At one point, you go to Alkenstar, and Will has a gunslinger. That's his main Pathfinder Society character, which was the main reason that I chose that scenario. And so I announce it, and Will's like, "Oh, great! I'm going to try a new character. I'm thinking an alchemist." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me right now, Will? I chose this scenario for you. This is a scenario that you get to go in and be among your gunslinging people, and you get to find out the history of guns. You are not allowed to play an alchemist. You play your gunslinger." He's like, "All right." So they arrive in Alkenstar, and then they get to the city where the majority of it takes place, and there's a sign outside, "No guns." And what? You have to hand over all your firearms. And I was like, oh my goodness, Will, this is not at all why I told you to play your gunslinger. I did not want to neuter you and remove your one cool thing when you didn't even want to play this character. You had a completely other character in mind. And I mean, there is cool ammunition as a reward at some point in the adventure, and you do get it on the chronicle sheet. So like, and we didn't finish this scenario. We're going to have to finish it another time when Will is back for visiting family for American Thanksgiving. But like, so as far as Will's concerned, I forced him to play a scenario where he has to play a weapon specialist, and then I took away that weapon.
And darn it.
Yeah. It didn't mention anything about that in the scenario summary. It was just saying, hey, Alkenstar, Mana Waste, maybe there's some guns. And there were, Param. And they were taken away.
No. Oh, well. Okay, I think we're winding down, man.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. Are we transitioning, or are we just going to say...
We'll be right back after this. And we're back.
Thank you for joining us for episode 168 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. Before we go, we're going to bring your attention to a couple of interesting things that either we care about, you care about, we think you'll care about. First of all, the Richard action figure. This is Richard the Warlock from Looking for Group. This was my swan song as far as developing general products before I became just a Blind Ferret game developer. And this is one of the first products that I pitched and got approved when I was doing general development. And it was the product I was not going to cut any corners on. It was the product I needed to be perfect. And we put it up on Kickstarter a few months ago. We have started. We have delivered to the backers. The grace period is ending on Friday. We're giving the backers a grace period of exclusivity. But on Friday, when we start our Black Friday sale, we are also adding the Richard action figure to the Blind Ferret store for the first time. Oh, you know what? I got one. Hold on a second.
Oh, I get to see it.
Yes. You know what? Well,
does he have a kung fu grip?
Well, of course he has a kung fu grip. Yeah, so here's actually some of the sketches that Boss Fight put together when they were designing it. So this was different ways that we can handle the lower body. We have the salt shaker, which is just one solid piece. The where it was soft goods, and he would actually have some kind of weird legs underneath. Or there was the segmented skirt, so he would have some kind of like snake-like lower body. And then I can't show you this second one. I can show you this much of no. There we go. This much. Because there were some other accessories that have been designed and might end up in an accessory pack. But anyway, the ones that made it into this is the Richard action
really
figure.
Cool box.
Yeah, we put a lot of effort into the box. It's got the power bars similar to Transformers, a file card like G.I. Joe, and it displays all of the action figure accessories. So if you want to keep it mint in box, you can. If you want to take it out, it is a resealable box. So you get all your cool Richard goodness, his alternate heads,
that's like a Figma.
Like what's that?
It looks like a Figma in quality.
What is a Figma?
These like insane Japanese action figures with like 18 swappable heads and hands, and they're just insane, and they're like $90 each.
I take that as a compliment. This is $25.
That's great.
Well, I worked hard on it, Param.
Yes. Sorry, I'm just really geeking out that you got to do an action figure, because I know that's like some holy grail of awesomeness, like some dream fulfilled for you.
Indeed. Actually, I recommend people check out the Kickstarter, because our Kickstarter video has like a vintage action figure feel to it, with it cleaning like graininess and stuff. So yeah, here. The Fork of Truth can be made into the Hand Fork of Truth, as was featured in an issue. His arms are removable. There we go. And you can add bear arms.
Well, all action figures' arms are removable. It's the reattaching.
All right, it's special. He has hot swap joints. Let me put on the kidney hats. That was... That's one of the more obscure things. Well, I've dropped the kidney hats.
Oh, well.
So I can't show you how perfectly it fits on his head. But yeah, I had a ton of fun designing this, working with Boss Fight. They were every bit the professionals that I was hoping they would be. And while the manufacturer was not quite the joy to work with as Boss Fight was, we eventually got the figure that we wanted. And you can too, for $25 starting on Friday. And while you're there, check out the Black Friday sales. It's shop.blindferret.com, or you can just go to lfg.co and click on the shop link.
Is it 25 US or Canadian?
That is 25 US.
Mm-hmm. I thought so. Sorry, Ryan.
Oh, wait. I can show you the fireball. So the fireball clips into his hand.
That's the most important part for a Richard figure.
I might have the wrong hands. Yeah, let me swap into a casting hand really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Now, while you are swapping Richard's casting hand,
Yes.
I want to shout out to a video game that shaped a lot of my formative development in my early game industry years, or my interest in gaming when I took it up that next notch. Neverwinter Nights is one of the most classic PC games, one of the most beloved PC RPGs going, only second to the Baldur's Gate and Infinity Engine games such as Planescape and Icewind Dale. And it is in that pedigree. It's just the first 3D engine that they developed. It's getting an enhanced edition by Beamdog, which are friends of the show. They are putting together a enhanced edition with new shaders and graphics and all the bells and whistles with all the expansion packs, just like you're used to with their enhanced editions. Neverwinter Nights is famous for two reasons. First, it is D&D 3.0, so Pathfinder fans should be very comfortable using the system. And it has like one of the best build your own adventure tools going, and a live DM engine. So you can actually go in and be a DM and have people playing through your adventure, and then spawn NPCs and control monsters and like spawn quests dynamically and everything.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's going to be $20 coming out fairly soon, and it will have the base game and all the expansion packs and all these graphical improvements. It's going to be fantastic. And the main game is like a 40-hour RPG, and their expansion packs are just entirely new 40-hour campaigns. So this is like a humongous amount of game for like really cheap, and especially for D&D fans and 3.0 fans and Pathfinder fans, you got to get there. It has mod support, crazy amount of fan community available for it, and it's just a lot of awesome.
Cool.
All right.
I have one more shout out. This is something that I should have shouted out to a long time ago. It's Robert Kenzie, friend of the show. He put together a book of dwarven poetry called Hammer on Stone. Technically translated by Robert Kenzie, but he wrote it. He's just pretending it's translated from Dwarven. Dwarven's not a real language. But anyway, so it's just a fun little book that's available on Lulu.com. And I noticed, or Jeff, when he came to GM the session on Monday, noticed it lying around and got a real kick out of it. And it made me realize that I also picked it up because I got a real kick out of it, and I never gave it its due on the podcast. So it is exactly what it sounds like. It's a book of dwarven poetry. It's fun. It's very much, if you like dwarves, it is infused with dwarven flavor.
All right. Sounds great. So I think we're ready to say goodbye.
Thank you for joining us.
Do we
go
have
ahead.
A thing to announce?
Do we? Oh, okay. So, yes, we will only have one more episode in 2017. I forgot the year for a second there, which might show you why we're only having one more episode in 2017. It will be in the near future, early December. We were going to have hopefully our Ultimate Wilderness review by then. We're just waiting on everyone to get their hands on their copy.
Yeah, there was a goof with Paizo's shipping orders for early this month, and my order just never came. So I got no book. I can't review a book I ain't got.
So we will be posting about this on our Facebook page, but just to officially let people know that normally we are on an every 2-week schedule. But come December, we're going to have one more episode and then just take the time off. I'm packing a house, as you can see, with all the changes going on behind me. Oh, Bard Wannabe is asking about the Book of the Damned review. So
that book is cursed.
Been damned?
We do the Book of the Damned review. It will be spontaneous. We will not give it warning. We will not give it time to thwart us again. No Direction Beyond will continue on schedule. That's just a much more lightweight show to produce, and we've got 3 people that can help with that. So even if one of us or 2 of us get taken out, we can still keep that show going. And we're talking about doing some sort of off-topic conversations and filler content to just keep you guys with some content. Plus the blogs are going to be going. So while No Direction Prime will be taking a short break during the holidays, still pay attention to the feed. There'll be content.
Yeah, and we already have some interviews lined up for January, so we'll be back. And we're not gone yet. We have at least one more episode.
We have one more episode where we're going to do the Ultimate Wilderness review. If it happens to have a Book of the Damned review in it, we're not saying, because then it will sneak attack us again.
All right, Bard Wannabe is asking, is Private Sanctuary completely dead? So
no.
Yes. All right, Param, do you have an answer to this?
It is not completely dead. It is slightly wounded. We have plans to make it do things, but that's future plans. It's kind of a mess, and it's not my show primarily. Yeah. It's Alex's show primarily at this point.
Yeah. Alex was given the keys to it, so it's all on him now.
Yeah, but it's
technically it has its own Facebook page, but we wrapped it all up into just the No Direction Facebook page.
Facebook page is sunsetted. And a lot of it's also on me. I'm the technical brains behind all the shows on the network at this point. So it's just with No Direction Beyond and all this other stuff we're doing, that's a lot of resources. So we hope to return to Private Sanctuary. We hope to return to Private Sanctuary with a Create Demiplane episode, because that's everybody's really wanting to see that. But we also have to be realistic about what we're able to do as a network. We're reaching the point where to go any further with this podcast and add even more content to this network will take some amount of dedication above what is a hobby.
Yeah, well put.
All right,
so until next time, I'm Ryan Costello. Started this over. Problem. Until next time. Ready?
Yes.
Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Parham.
If you want the If you want to find the path, you need No Direction.
Bye, guys.